Some of them sold millions of records. Some of them had voices that could stop a room cold. Some of them changed the entire direction of black music in America and were never properly thanked for it. Instead, they were silenced, shelved, squeezed out, blacklisted. Not by accident, not by bad luck, by a music industry that has always known exactly how to destroy the people who built it. Today, we are going back, all the way back, to the golden era of R&B and Soul, the 1960s, the 70s, the 80s, the era of Motown and Stax, of silk suits in concert halls, of voices that came from somewhere deeper than talent. And we are going to talk about what the industry did to 12 of them. Before we get into the list, I need you to hold on to something. One of the artists coming up later was personally blacklisted by one of the most powerful men in the music business, not because of drugs, not because of scandal, but because they refused to hand over the rights to their own music. That executive made one call, and a career that had taken 15 years to build was over in a week. We will get to that story, but first, let's start at number 12. Number 12. Billy Paul. At some point in the mid-1970s, radio stations across America started quietly pulling a record from rotation. Not because it wasn't performing, not because audiences had stopped requesting it, but because the wrong people were paying attention to what the song was actually saying. Billy Paul had recorded Me and Mrs. Jones in 1972. It became a #1 record, a soul classic. A song about an extramarital affair told with such honesty and such tenderness that it made people uncomfortable in the best way possible. It made the industry uncomfortable in a way that had consequences. Billy Paul was a Philadelphia soul singer who had been working since the 1950s. By the time he reached Kenny Gamble and Leon Huff at Philadelphia International Records, he was already a seasoned artist, a jazz-trained vocalist with depth and range that most singers half his age couldn't touch. Me and Mrs. Jones was proof of what happened when real artistry met real production. But Philadelphia International, for all its brilliance, operated within the same industry power structures as every other label. And when religious groups and conservative broadcasters began applying pressure over the song's subject matter, the label's response was to manage the controversy rather than defend their artist. But I'm pretty strong. Billy Paul found his follow-up singles receiving less promotional muscle. The machine that had made him famous quietly began to slow down. He was never given the full platform his talent demanded. The follow-up albums came and went with diminishing support. By the late 1970s, one of the most distinctive voices in Philadelphia soul was effectively invisible on mainstream radio, a direct consequence of an industry that decided controversy was more trouble than artistry was worth. What Billy Paul left behind is a body of work that still stops people in their tracks when they encounter it. Me and Mrs. Jones is not just a great song. It is a document of human feeling, the kind of record that reminds you what soul music was actually for. The industry tried to make people forget about him. The music made that impossible. Before we continue, can I ask you for a small favor? Only a tiny percentage of the people watching this channel are actually subscribed. That means more than 95% of you enjoy the videos but haven't joined the family yet. And honestly, that part stings a little. Videos like this don't just happen. They take hours of digging through old records, researching artists, double-checking facts, restoring audio, writing scripts, and editing visuals, all to bring back memories and give these songs the respect they deserve. If this channel has ever helped you rediscover a forgotten track, made you smile, relax, or feel a little nostalgic, that's exactly why it exists. So before we move on, take just a second to hit subscribe. It's completely free, but it truly means the world to us. It tells YouTube that this music still matters and that the work behind these videos is worth supporting. All right, now let's get back to the music. Number 11, Millie Jackson. She was too honest, that was the problem. In an era when Black women in music were expected to be polished, palatable, and unthreatening, Millie Jackson walked onto stages and said exactly what she thought about men, about relationships, about the reality of being a woman navigating a world designed to diminish her. And the industry did not know what to do with that. What they eventually decided to do was marginalize her. Millie Jackson arrived in the early 1970s with a voice that was equal parts gospel fire and raw street truth. She could sing a ballad that would make you weep and then turn around and deliver a spoken word monologue about a cheating man that would make the entire room collapse with laughter and recognition. She was a complete performer, funny, fierce, deeply musical, and absolutely in control of her own narrative. Her albums for Spring Records throughout the 1970s were genuine artistic achievements. Caught Up in 1974, a concept album told from the perspectives of both a wife and a mistress, was a radical piece of work. It treated Black women's inner lives with a complexity and specificity that the mainstream music industry had no interest in platforming. She was too explicit for mainstream radio, too uncompromising for the executives who wanted their female artists decorative and obedient. Spring Records was an independent label without the muscle to force radio programmers to play what they were uncomfortable with. So Millie Jackson, one of the most purely talented soul singers of her generation, was effectively kept off the playlist that would have made her a household name. She kept recording, she kept touring, she built a devoted audience on her own terms. But the mainstream erasure of her work meant that most people who should have known her name never did. That is the industry's failure, not hers. Number 10, Howard Tate. There are artists whose stories the industry buries so completely that most people have never even heard the name. Howard Tate is one of those artists, and that absence, that total erasure, is itself the evidence of what was done to him. In the late 1960s, Howard Tate was recording some of the most powerful soul music being made anywhere in America. His work with producer Jerry Ragavoy at Verve Records produced records that sat at the exact intersection of gospel, blues, and the emerging soul sound. Raw, emotionally devastating, technically extraordinary. Get It While You Can, later covered by Janis Joplin, was his. He wrote it. He recorded it first. He did it better. His voice was not smooth. It was not polished. It was the kind of voice that sounded like it had survived something. And that authenticity was precisely what the industry of the late 1960s did not know how to market to a mainstream audience that labels were trying to reach across racial lines. Verve Records underwent ownership changes. The staff that had believed in Howard Tate moved on. Without internal advocates, without promotional infrastructure, without a label that understood what they had, his records simply stopped reaching people. He was dropped. He recorded for other labels briefly without success, and then he disappeared from the music industry entirely. Once upon a time, you went on your... For decades, Howard Tate was gone. He struggled with addiction. He lost years. He became to the music world a footnote, one of those names that only the deepest soul scholars remembered. He was rediscovered in the early 2000s and recorded again before his death in 2011. The people who found his original recordings understood immediately what the industry had thrown away. A voice like that, a truth like that, does not come along often. The industry discarded it without a second thought. Ain't nobody home. Number 9, Sly Stone. There are few stories in the history of Black music as complicated, as painful, or as instructive as the story of Sly Stone. Because Sly Stone did not just make great music, he changed the entire architecture of what popular Black music could be. and the industry destroyed him for it, piece by piece, over the course of a decade. When Sly and the Family Stone arrived in the late 1960s, nothing sounded like them. Integrated, psychedelic, funky, political without being didactic, joyful and furious at the same time. Stand in 1969 was a masterpiece. There's a Riot Going On in 1971 was something else entirely. Darker, more fractured, a document of a man watching his optimism get ground down by reality. It was one of the most important albums of its era. The industry responded to Sly Stone's genius the way it has always responded to black artists who become too powerful, too independent, too unwilling to be controlled. They surrounded him with bad deals, bad advice, and predatory management. Epic Records held him to a contract that gave him almost no financial control over the music he was creating. The people around him, managers, associates, hangers-on, stripped money from him systematically. The drug use that came to define the later narrative of his career did not emerge in a vacuum. It emerged in the context of a man being financially exploited by everyone around him while being celebrated publicly as a genius. The isolation, the paranoia, the self-destruction, these were symptoms, not causes. By the late 1970s, Sly Stone was effectively finished as a mainstream force. The industry had taken everything, his money, his publishing, his momentum, and left him with the consequences while keeping the profits. He has spent decades in legal battles trying to reclaim what was taken from him. He has never fully succeeded. The music endures. Every funk record made after 1969 owes something to Sly Stone. Every artist who fused genres, who brought a band with genuine musical democracy, who tried to say something real with a pop song, they are all standing on his foundation. The industry took his career. It could not take that. Number 8. Bobby Womack. Bobby Womack spent most of his career being simultaneously celebrated and undermined. Critics knew what he was. Other artists, Mick Jagger, Wilson Pickett, Janis Joplin, recorded his songs and made them famous. And yet, Bobby Womack himself was perpetually denied the full mainstream breakthrough that his talent demanded. That is not an accident. That is a pattern. He came up in the gospel tradition, singing with his brothers as the Womack Brothers, before Sam Cooke signed them to Saw Records and rechristened them the Valentinos. When Sam Cooke was murdered in 1964, Bobby Womack made a decision that would follow him for the rest of his career. He married Cooke's widow, Barbara Campbell, just 3 months after Cooke's death. The black music community and the industry never fully forgave him for it. He was blacklisted. Not formally, the industry rarely does anything formally, but effectively. Radio programmers who had previously championed him pulled back. Industry figures who had been allies distanced themselves. The personal scandal became professional consequence in the way that the industry has always weaponized the private lives of artists it wants to control or punish. He rebuilt slowly through the late 1960s and 1970s, finding success as a session guitarist and writer, while fighting for recognition as a solo artist. Dig a little bit deeper. His recordings for United Artists in the early 1970s, particularly That's the Way I Feel About Ya and Woman's Gotta Have It, are soul masterpieces. But the full commercial infrastructure was never placed behind him the way it was placed behind lesser talent who didn't carry the weight of industry disapproval. Bobby Womack never stopped. He recorded through decades of personal struggle, through addiction, through loss, through an industry that kept finding new reasons to undervalue him. His 2012 album, The Bravest Man in the Universe, made with Damon Albarn, introduced him to an entirely new generation. He died in 2014. The full accounting of what he was owed in recognition, in resources, in simple justice was never made. Number 7, Minnie Riperton. This one is different from the others on this list because Minnie Riperton was not blacklisted by the industry in the conventional sense. She was blacklisted by something the industry consistently refuses to confront: the way it abandons black women artists the moment their circumstances become inconvenient, the moment their story becomes about something other than entertainment. Minnie Riperton had one of the most extraordinary voices in the history of recorded music, a 5.5 octave range, control and tenderness, and a purity of tone that made other singers stop and listen in disbelief. Loving You in 1975 was a #1 record, soft and intimate and unlike anything on the radio at the time. And then she was diagnosed with breast cancer. She continued to perform and record while undergoing treatment. She became a public advocate for breast cancer awareness at a time when the disease was not discussed openly, particularly not in black communities. She used her platform to try to save other people's lives. The industry's response was to quietly reduce its investment in her career. A sick artist is a difficult marketing proposition. An artist who is publicly discussing illness is not the image that labels want attached to their product. The promotional support for her later albums diminished. The machine slowed down. Minnie Riperton died in July 1979. She was 31 years old. She had continued working until she could not. What the industry owed her was not just better promotion. It was the recognition that her voice, her actual, physical, irreplaceable voice, was one of the great natural wonders of American music. That recognition came too late, too slowly, and too quietly. It always does. We are more than halfway through this list, and the story coming up next involves a man whose voice was so powerful that it genuinely frightened the people who were supposed to be supporting him, because they understood, maybe better than anyone, that a voice like that, combined with the mind that was starting to ask questions about where the money was going, was the most dangerous thing in the music business. Will you come inside me? Do you wanna ride in? Number 6, Teddy Pendergrass. Before the accident. We have to start there because it is impossible to tell the story of Teddy Pendergrass without understanding what was taken from the world on March 18, 1982. But we also have to be clear. The industry had already begun its work on Teddy Pendergrass before that night. The accident finished what the system had already started. In the late 70s, Teddy Pendergrass was the most viscerally powerful male R&B vocalist alive. Not just popular, powerful in a way that was almost physical. God knows I know what to do. His concerts were events. Women screamed. The energy in a Teddy Pendergrass arena was unlike anything else happening in black music at that moment. 5 consecutive platinum solo albums. He was Harold Melvin in the Blue Note's secret weapon before he went solo, and when he left, he took everything with him. He was beginning to understand the business, beginning to ask questions that the people around him did not want to answer. About publishing, about royalties, about where the money from 5 platinum albums was actually going. Those questions made powerful people uncomfortable in a way that always precedes the industry's particular brand of retaliation. The accident, a car crash that left him paralyzed from the chest down, changed everything, and the industry's response revealed its character completely. Rather than standing behind one of their most commercially successful artists, labels reduced their investment. Comeback attempts were met with lukewarm promotional support. The machine that had been so enthusiastic about Teddy Pendergrass when he was healthy and unquestioning became suddenly less available when he needed it most. Let me rub your back when you say. He fought back with extraordinary courage. He learned to perform from a wheelchair. He continued to record. He refused to disappear on the industry's timeline. His 1988 comeback single Joy reached the top 10, proof that the voice, even altered by his injuries, still carried something that moved people. Teddy Pendergrass deserved the full resources of the industry he had made rich. He deserved advocates who fought for him the way he had fought for himself. He got neither. What he got was his own refusal to quit. That has to count for something. It counts for a great deal. Number 5, Gil Scott-Heron. Gil Scott-Heron was never going to be allowed to be famous. Not truly, not in the way that the music industry defines fame. Radio saturation, arena tours, magazine covers, the full commercial apparatus working in your direction. Because what Gil Scott-Heron was saying was too true, too specific, too dangerous to the structures that the industry was built on and benefited from. He arrived in the early 1970s with spoken word poetry set to music that predicted, analyzed, and indicted American society with a precision that still reads as current. The revolution will not be televised. Whitey on the moon. Winter in America. These were not protest songs in the gentle, radio-friendly sense. They were dispatches, diagnoses, evidence. Mainstream radio had no interest in playing records that told the truth about American racism, about poverty, about the gap between the country's mythology and its reality. The industry, which depended on relationships with radio programmers, with advertisers, with the corporate infrastructure of American media, had every structural incentive to keep Gil Scott-Heron's music as far from mainstream audiences as possible. He was signed to small labels, Arista for a period, but without the promotional infrastructure that mainstream artists received. His albums reached the audiences that sought them out. They did not reach the audiences that needed them. That distinction matters. The personal struggles that marked his later years, addiction, legal trouble, the slow dissolution of a brilliant mind, did not happen in isolation. They happened in the context of an artist who had spent decades being told, in every structural way the industry knows how to communicate, that what he had to say was not wanted, that his truth was not commercially viable, that he could exist at the margins but never at the center. He is the godfather of hip-hop. Every rapper who ever used music to tell a political truth, to document a reality that the mainstream wanted to ignore, is his descendant. The industry kept him from the mainstream. It could not keep him from the future. Yes, well, truth is there, ain't it? Number 4, Phyllis Hyman. There is a particular kind of tragedy in the story of Phyllis Hyman because she was not blacklisted in the shadows. She talked about it openly, publicly. She named what the industry was doing to her, the broken promises, the shelves albums, the deliberate undermining of her career. And the industry's response was to use her willingness to speak out as further evidence that she was difficult, unstable, a problem. That is how the system protects itself. Phyllis Hyman arrived in the mid-1970s with a voice that combined the sophistication of a jazz singer with the emotional directness of soul. 6 feet tall, breathtaking in her presence, with a vocal instrument that industry insiders consistently describes as one of the finest of her generation. She signed to Buddha Records, then to Arista, where Clive Davis was building one of the most powerful rosters in the business. And Clive Davis, by most accounts, did not know what to do with Phyllis Hyman. She did not fit the image he was constructing for his female artists. She was too tall, too dark-skinned, too jazz-inflected, too unwilling to soften herself for crossover appeal. Album after album was recorded and then given inadequate promotional support. She watched artists with a fraction of her talent receive the full machine behind them, while her releases were quietly allowed to underperform. She spoke about this in interviews. She talked about the racism within the industry's beauty standards, about the way labels decided which Black women were marketable and which ones were not, and how those decisions had nothing to do with talent and everything to do with proximity to white aesthetic standards. In June 1995, hours before she was scheduled to perform at the Apollo Theater, Phyllis Hyman took her own life. She was 45 years old. She left a note. The note was, among other things, a statement about what the industry had done to her. The music she recorded, despite everything, is extraordinary, sophisticated, emotionally complex, technically flawless. It is the work of an artist who was never given what she deserved. That debt cannot be repaid, but it can be acknowledged.
Number 3, Marvin Gaye. No list about blacklisted soul artists can be told honestly without arriving here, because Marvin Gaye's relationship with Motown Records with Berry Gordy is one of the defining stories of what the music industry does to artists who insist on being more than the product the label has designed them to be. Motown in the 1960s was a machine, an extraordinary machine, built by Berry Gordy with genuine brilliance and genuine ruthlessness. It produced music that changed the world. It also controlled its artists with a totality that left many of them with almost nothing after years of making the label rich. Marvin Gaye was Motown's most gifted artist and its most persistent problem. He had his own ideas about the music he wanted to make, about the political realities he wanted his music to address, about the kind of artist he was going to be. When he brought Berry Gordy the recordings that would become What's Going On, a response to the Vietnam War, to racial violence, to the state of America in 1971, Gordy refused to release it. He called it uncommercial. He called it a mistake. Marvin Gaye released it anyway. It became one of the best-selling and most critically acclaimed albums in Motown history. It is one of the greatest albums ever made by anyone, but the victory was not clean. Gordy never forgot that Gaye had gone over his head. The power struggle between them, over creative control, over money, over who owned what, defined the rest of Marvin Gaye's Motown years. He was simultaneously the label's most important artist and its most embattled one. His publishing rights were structured to benefit the label. His royalty rates were not commensurate with his commercial success. The financial exploitation that was standard Motown practice hit him as hard as anyone. He left for Columbia Records in 1982, recording Midnight Love and the era-defining Sexual Healing. He was in the middle of a genuine creative resurgence when on April 1st, 1984, he was shot and killed by his father. What Marvin Gaye was owed in money, in creative freedom, in the simple dignity of being allowed to make his art without constant institutional warfare, was never fully given to him. What he left behind, despite all of it, is a monument. But monuments do not erase debts. They just make the debts more visible.
Number 2, Nina Simone. Nina Simone was blacklisted for the most honest reason the American music industry has ever blacklisted anyone. She told the truth about America, clearly, without softening it, without making it comfortable for audiences who would have preferred not to hear it. And the industry, which exists within America, which depends on American commercial infrastructure, which cannot afford to offend the people who control American radio and media, did what it always does when an artist tells an uncomfortable truth. It shut the doors. Eunice Kathleen Wayman, Nina Simone, was one of the most extraordinarily gifted musicians of the 20th century, a classical pianist who had been denied entry to the Curtis Institute of Music, one of the most prestigious conservatories in America, almost certainly because of her race. She channeled that rejection and everything it represented into a career that fused classical technique with jazz, blues, gospel, and soul into something that belonged to no single category and surpassed all of them. After the 1963 bombing of the 16th Street Baptist Church in Birmingham, in which 4 young black girls were murdered, Nina Simone wrote Mississippi Goddam in under an hour. It was a song of pure fury, controlled, articulate, devastating fury. Radio stations in the South returned the promotional copies to her label, broken in half as a statement. She did not stop. 4 women, to be young, gifted, and black. I wish I knew how it would feel to be free. Each record was a document, each performance was a declaration, and the industry, which depended on Southern radio markets, on white-owned distribution networks, on the goodwill of the very power structures Nina Simone was indicting, steadily withdrew its support. By the late 1960s and into the 1970s, she was effectively frozen out of the mainstream American industry. She moved to Europe. She lived in France, in Barbados, in Liberia. She continued to perform for audiences who understood what she was giving them. She continued to tell the truth. She died in 2003, the full recognition of what she was, not just as a musician, but as a moral force, as one of the great artists of any era in any medium, came largely after her death. The industry that blacklisted her now sells her records. That is the final insult, and it is entirely consistent with everything she spent her life documenting.
I know, got news for you all.
Everything comes back to James Brown. Everything. Every conversation about R&B, about soul, about funk, about hip-hop, about the economics of black music in America, it all runs through James Brown eventually. Because James Brown's story is not just a story of one artist being blacklisted. It is the story of an entire industry's relationship with black creative genius. It is the story of what happens when you build an empire and the empire turns against you. James Brown was not just a performer, he was an industry. He ran his own touring operation, he managed his own band, he negotiated his own deals. He understood earlier than almost any black artist of his era that the money was in the ownership, in the publishing, in the master recordings, in the business infrastructure that surrounds the music. He fought for that ownership with the ferocity that the industry found threatening because it was supposed to belong to them. In the 1960s, he was the hardest working man in show business, a title that was not just promotional, but literally true. He played over 300 dates a year. He paid his band out of his own pocket and fined them for missed notes and unpressed uniforms because he understood that excellence was not optional. Papa's got a brand new bag. I got you. Cold sweat. Say it loud. I'm black and I'm proud. He was defining what black American music was and could be in real time. Say It Loud in 1968 was the moment the industry decided James Brown had become a problem. A song of explicit black pride, released in the year of Martin Luther King's assassination and the political convulsions that followed, that told black Americans to celebrate who they were without apology. Pop radio pulled back. The crossover audience that had been buying his records grew uncomfortable. Booking agents reported that certain venues, white venues, were no longer interested in James Brown. He pivoted. He kept working. He found new sounds, the lean, percussive funk that would define the 1970s and become the most sampled music in hip-hop history. But the industry infrastructure that had been behind him was never fully restored. His label deals through the 1970s were consistently unfavorable. His publishing situation, the rights to some of the most sampled music ever recorded, was structured in ways that meant enormous amounts of money flowed away from him. The legal troubles that accumulated in the 1980s, the tax issues, the personal struggles, none of these emerged in isolation. They emerged in the context of a man who had been financially exploited for 20 years, who had made other people extraordinarily wealthy, and who was fighting on every front simultaneously, against the industry, against the IRS, against the personal demons that accumulate when you have been in a state of constant warfare your entire adult life. James Brown died on Christmas Day, 2006. His estate has been in legal dispute ever since. His children, his companions, his former managers, all fighting over what remains of what he built. The irony is precise and painful. A man who spent his entire life fighting for ownership of his work died with that ownership still contested. He is the godfather of soul, the originator of funk, the most sampled artist in history, the man who gave Black America Say It Loud at the exact moment it needed to hear it.
The industry took from him consistently, structurally, and without apology. The least we can do is remember clearly what was taken and who took it. "12 artists, 12 different stories, 12 different ways the industry found to silence, exploit, marginalize, and erase the people who built it. Billy Call, Millie Jackson, Howard Tate, Sly Stone, Bobby Womack, Minnie Riperton, Teddy Pendergrass, Gil Scott-Heron, Phyllis Hyman, Marvin Gaye, Nina Simone, James Brown. These names are not footnotes, they are the foundation. The music they made, the music that the industry tried to bury, limit, or take credit for, is still here. It still moves, it still tells the truth. The industry has a long memory for the artists it wants to forget, but so do we. Which one of these stories changed the way you hear the music? Drop their name below, because these voices were never just entertainment, they were evidence, and evidence does not disappear.